Well, one of the things I also paid more attention to tonight, partly because I knew you were going to be up here with me, was watching you. You have a lot of time on stage where you are listening to what must be very uncomfortable conversations. It's in the first act that you just happen to be in the wrong place at that time, and you don't really want to be hearing what the family and the neighbors are talking about. But going through all the reactions, and again in the second act, you're trying to get your story out, and waiting and listening to all the garbage conversation because of all the interruptions. How do you deal with that as an actor? I mean, it seems like the script is helping to build up whatever frustration is, and how it's going to come out when it does. But how do you deal with that and listen to it and keep it as if you haven't heard this before every time you're doing this play?
Well, that's a wonderful question, because in rehearsal, we would always have these moments where we'd run a scene and we'd get right up until my part, and there would be break, 10 minutes, take a break, and I'd be like, what? I can't believe it. And so we'd have to stop. And so it really was informing very much what my character would eventually feel as I sat on this stage. And how I keep that fresh is, part of it, of course, is just technique. After you do this long enough, you have to stay alert. You have to be alive in the moment. You can't check out and start thinking about your grocery list. And then that's technique. But the other thing is to really honestly be listening to what your cast members are saying, because there are times, and it hasn't happened while we were on stage, but definitely during rehearsal, where a word might get switched up, which is significant to what you have to say. A good example of that one time was with Sarah, who plays Lindsay in Act 2 and the deaf woman in Act 1. She changed the line. Instead of saying what the neighborhood used to be, she said something else. And I have to listen to that to use the word that she used in my next sentence. So it's very important for all of us to constantly stay alive and focused and be in the moment. You can't not be in the moment. And the wonderful thing that Bruce Norris did with this play is he did make it where you build to this energy where everybody can understand why Lena has to snap or express herself the way she does, because she's been trying and she keeps getting interrupted. And she's in Act 2, she's invisible the first 15 minutes. And in Act 1, she's invisible for the first 15 or so minutes. So he's been very strategic in the way he set things up.
And during the moments where Francine is just on stage and overhearing the arguments that are being expressed, are you hearing it as Francine, or are you hearing it as Tyler?
I believe I hear it as Francine, because it's so much in there, what they do in their discussion that proves to me as Francine they don't even see me, that we are not, as Bev says, friends, is they don't acknowledge me, they don't include me in the conversation. The way they talk to me, they're talking to Francine, they're not talking to Tyler. You have to be able to, as an artist, marry yourself to the character, but at the same time leave a great deal of yourself out of the character, because then you're not really being alive in that moment if you're running around as Tyler in the first act. So I have to listen to them from the perspective of Francine. And that's the only way it can build to feeling insulted when Carl says what he says, or insulted when, or hurt even, because I think insult is not the right word. It's more feeling of hurt by what is being said and the lack of regard for me and Chris, who plays my husband, Albert. So you have to live in that moment and be only Francine up here.
And how much leeway or how much discussion did you have during rehearsals and what's coming from the script of how strong a character Francine is? I mean, this is not the stereotypical 1950s domestic worker that we might have seen on television or in the movies. So she's certainly a very proud and strong woman who is not rude, but is certainly not afraid to stand on her own. And certainly very different than the character you're playing in You Can't Take It With You, though she's also strong in a way, but in obviously a much more playful way, because that play is more...
Well, we had quite a bit of discussion. Michael did a wonderful thing, which kind of gets lost now with theater, which is he sat down and we had wonderful table work for a week, and it was really good to examine this play and talk about what we thought and where we were coming from. And as far as my character is concerned, I feel strongly that a lot of the characters we see, when we see American blacks in these roles on television as housekeepers and domestics and servants, they're stereotypical, they're not genuine. These people are right out of my own home and my own family, and they were not running and, you know, step and fetch it and you know, doing the things that they have them doing on television. Instead, they were honorable people who went to work like we do today, and they respected themselves, and they respected and understood the dynamic in the time that they were living in. And it was in that I tried to represent Francine in this character, because she is very much a real example of what it was like. You can still be proud and stand there and listen to this stuff and hear what's being said to you, but you don't say anything because it's not your argument, it's not your place. And you knew that in 1959, you knew it wasn't your place. And the wonderful thing about this play in relation to A Raisin in the Sun is that if you see A Raisin in the Sun, Ruth is a domestic, and she talks about working for her white woman and how her white woman responds to her wanting to take the day off. And so in 1959, Lorraine Hansberry was the first play where you saw American blacks in their in a real way. And so that is a reflection of what I think Francine is, a reflection of Ruth going to work. So I hope that answered that question.
I'm curious, how many of you know A Raisin in the Sun?
Oh, wonderful.
I mean, for those of you who don't know the play, this play is sort of inspired by that play. There are ties with your aunt in the second act that she refers to. This home is the one that the younger family in A Raisin in the Sun was moving into. And Carl Lindner, that David Breitbarth played in the first act, is the only character that's the same. He is the one who went to the Youngers and tried to buy the house from them and prevent them from moving into this neighborhood. So Bruce Norris, the playwright, has taken that story and just gone off and imagined it from a totally different perspective. But tying in, I mean, you could spend 4 hours tonight talking about all the issues of political correctness, of race relations, of neighborhoods, of real estate, property. I mean, all these things are all touched on in a very human and unneighborly way, I guess. I have to assume that the whole speech that you give in the second act, I mean, having that background of knowing this play, have you done A Raisin in the Sun?
I have done A Raisin in the Sun a couple times.
There's a lot there for you to build off of when you talk about the traditions in the neighborhood and what this place means to you?
There is a lot there to build off of from A Raisin in the Sun, but there's just a lot in our history, period, in American history, to build off of for this play. And literally, you do not have to see A Raisin in the Sun, obviously, to totally understand and grasp this play. It's a nice device that Bruce Norris used by seeing A Raisin in the Sun, feeling inspired by the character, by the play, and then taking that Lindner character and bringing us into another world. That's a wonderful device. But our society has informed these characters without another play. Do you know what I mean? So I know that play well, and it's a good piece of reference material. But there's a lot of other reference materials as well.
I'm curious, the second act devolves into horrible jokes, which maybe you laugh and maybe you laugh uncomfortably. What is that like, that whole scene like to perform for you? Is it uncomfortable? Is it awkward? What does it do for you?
None of the scenes are uncomfortable or awkward because as artists, you can't be on stage and in the audience, and you can never hate yourself. Each one of you all cannot live your lives and totally hate yourself. You can have issues with yourself, don't we all have that? But you can't really hate yourself. So that's how characters, when you're playing a character, if you're saying something that's absolutely horrific, you don't say it, you don't think you're saying it from a horrible space. You just think, you're being honest. You understand that you can't dislike yourself as a character. So while we're up here playing, for us, it's just fun. It's fun because you're doing what you love doing, and two, you're playing characters that the audience gets to dislike. You know, you want to make, and whenever you get to do that, and one of my favorite actors, and I love a lot of the classics, was Barbara Stanwyck, and she would always say she loves being a bitch. Everybody remembers the bitch, you know? And so that's the way it is. You like playing those characters that get everybody all riled up and want to talk about it, and you don't dislike them at all. They're fun.
Did you all feel uncomfortable or awkward during that whole segment of the second act? Sure. Yeah. Liked it? The jokes. I mean, well, it really starts with just with David's character, Steve, talking, and his wife, like, "Who are you?" and then it just gets worse in a sense.
They were uncomfortable, but they were authentic in the context of what was happening.
Yes.
Great. Are there any questions out there?
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Go ahead.
This is wonderful performance, and thank you.
Thank you.
And my question to you is, once you get so into you, and how do you, once you end your acting of this play or other performances, how do you sort of divorce or separate yourself from that character, and or do you always keep part of it?
She's asking, once you get so involved and engrossed in a character, how long does it take to sort of get out of it, and how does it impact the other things that you're doing?
Well, in the case of this character, it took about 7 seconds, the time it took me to take off that trench coat and throw on my own dress. And I was back to being Tyla. There are instances when you play characters that you take home with you, and it takes a little bit to shake them. For me, I love to shake them as soon as I can. They are characters, they're roles, it's not my life. And the beauty of it is to be able to experience a different life and then walk right out of it back into your own. There are things about this particular character that you become aware of because you're examining race and relations and things like that all the time. So just in my daily life, I become aware of moments that inform the play when I come back to it, you know? But I get rid of it quick.
Well, thank you very much for staying. Thank you, Tyla.
Thank you.
It's been a great evening.
I hope I answered all the questions that you asked, because I can ramble.